This is Laura.
And Maricela.
We are in Florence, Italy at the Casa Buonarroti, looking at the Madonna of the Steps. Michelangelo's Madonna of the Steps was carved in 1491 and is one of his oldest existing works. Apparently, it was carved while he was still very young and living within the Medici household.
And did you know that Giorgino Vasari actually recorded that Michelangelo wished to copy the manner of Donatello?
No, I did not.
However, the differences rather than similarities are more evident. Michelangelo composed his relief along two long crossing diagonal defined by the Virgin's left leg and by the stairs, balustrade, that divide his work into two unequal counterbalanced halves.
That's very interesting.
He emphasized the dense corporeality of the figures and harsh stoniness of the throne, stairway, and wall to symbolize the earthly church.
Do you know what caught my eye?
What is that?
I find it interesting that he chose to hide the child's face.
It may be because the child was meant to be sleeping in the mother's arms, and she is simply protecting him from the sun or the light.
Or maybe she's nursing him, and she's just trying to cover up a bit.
Those are good observations. We can also observe that this is a low relief sculpture. Do you know what that is?
Yes, it's a sculptural form in which figures are carved in a flat surface and project only slightly from their background, instead of standing freely like Michelangelo's David.
Yes, that is correct.
Speaking of Michelangelo's David, we are now at the Galleria dell'Accademia looking at our 14-foot 3-inch friend David, who was completed in 1504.
What is the first thing that catches your eye?
When looking at Michelangelo's David, the first thing that catches my eye is the way he stands in contrapposto with his weight on one leg and his opposite arm flexed while holding onto the sling.
The first thing I think about when I see the David is how much work it took to make him. Did you know that there were 3 men before Michelangelo who attempted to complete the David?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, there was Agostino, who got help from Donatello, and Antonio Rossellino.
Wow, that's cool. I think that Michelangelo's willingness to take risks is evident in how he carved the David from a flawed block of marble that another sculptor had abandoned.
Yes, it shows not just his skill, but his drive.
I really love that he took something broken that someone else had given up on and made it into a masterpiece that is still widely studied and admired after over 500 years.
Yes. Now let's talk about Michelangelo's inspiration.
Okay, sounds good.
The cathedral's Hercules relief served as one of Michelangelo's sources, as they had done for Donatello's bronze David.
I think that their similarities start with the stance, the placement of arms, and the turn of the head, which indicate that Michelangelo intended to combine David and Hercules.
Also, Michelangelo created a slender figure to combine the classical athlete and the lean adolescent. He also gave the David a wide stance, like the image of Hercules.
Wow, I didn't think of that. Unlike the Madonna of the Steps and David, there is another work that is just as famous and not made of stone. Do you know what that work is?
Of course, you're talking about the Sistine Chapel.
Yes. Now we are in Vatican City at the Sistine Chapel, looking at the ceiling Michelangelo painted starting in 1473 and ending 10 years later. One thing that I noticed about the Sistine Chapel is that there's nothing special about it on the outside.
That is interesting. I wonder how many people would simply walk by it, not realizing the beauty that it holds inside.
Guess you shouldn't judge a book by its cover.
Can I just point out how ironic it is that someone who didn't want to take part in the painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel did such a great job?
And did you know that Michelangelo was more than a sculptor and a painter?
No, I had no idea.
He was also a poet. He even wrote a poem about his misery while painting the Sistine Chapel. In his poem, he says things like, "I've already grown a goiter from this torture," and complained about how his stomach was squashed up underneath his chin, while his face made a fine floor for droppings.
I can only imagine having to tilt your head up for so long to paint the ceiling, especially in such detail.
And did you notice all the naked men on the ceiling?
How can anyone miss it?
I find it interesting that Michelangelo placed Ignuti on the ceiling of the chapel. After finding out that he didn't want to do this project because he didn't see himself as a painter but as a sculptor, I can imagine that he wanted to mock those that commissioned him to paint the ceiling.
That's funny. You know what's amazing?
What?
This Michelangelo fellow. He's quite talented for a turtle. Ha! Ha ha!